You and me, you heard Coach K, you heard Jay Wright. It's you and me now this last hour as we move it along on this afternoon program. We got baseball, which begins next Thursday. We'll be into that. We'll figure out a way to get the season underway. We'll get you some spots. We'll start Steve Phillips next Wednesday. We'll put him on early, occasionally in the first part of the year and then a lot more at the second half of the year. Tom Verducci, we hope next week too. We'll get you a couple of baseball spots just to get you warmed up for the season. That starts a week from Thursday. The games are at 1 o'clock. We told you about some situations with the sport Blue Jays with all their injuries and all those kinds of things. I heard that George Springer might be ready earlier than I thought. I mentioned that yesterday about Springer out into a month. Who knows? So that is something we're moving along with the baseball. It's you and I here on this afternoon show. Let's do you a couple quickies here and tell you what is on our mind at the top of the hour. We started this way today. I'll go back to it. Number one is the scenario with the NHL decision. They fired Tim Peel. Was his name Tim? I think it was Tim Peel. They fired him today. He is an NHL official who last night during the Nashville-Detroit game, whistled a penalty on the Predators in a game when they were winning in the second period. And he was caught on microphone saying, boy, there wasn't a lot to it, but I wanted to call a blanket penalty. And he used that word on Nashville, thinking, of course, about evening it up. The NHL and Coley Campbell today responded immediately and fired him. This was going to be his last year anyway. He has officiated 1,300 NHL games, 90 in the postseason. And the NHL today took liberty and got rid of him. Again, the lesson for me, there's a couple lessons. Number one, you can't say anything if you're an official because those microphones are all over the place. And it looks bad when you indicate that you are calling a penalty to even up the game, quote unquote, and then you use bad language to boot. It looks terrible because that strikes at the integrity of the sport. But I look at it this thing. And the NHL, we try to get some NHL representation on today. They said, apologize, but this is a very delicate issue. We will not. No reason. We can't get a person on to discuss it. I thought Coley, who has been the director of officials there for a long time, used to coach the Rangers. I thought that would, and discipline. We thought that would be the way to go, but was not able to put that together today. The problem I have with the NHL with this is that if the NHL or the NBA or any sport out there is trying to tell you that, each particular segment of a game, whether it be an at-bat, whether it be a period, a shift, a quarter, an offensive possession, that is refereed independently of what has occurred in the course of the game, they're lying to you. And if they sit there and they tell you that, they like to think that might be the case, but that is not accurate. There are makeup calls in the sport, as there should be. There are makeup calls in the sport all the time. And, and a lot of times these officials will make a call early in the game that they won't make late in the game. So the inconsistency continues on a day in, day out basis. In the beginning of a ball game or the beginning of a quarter, an NBA official will make a call that he will not make at the end of a quarter, at the end of the game. The NHL official, if he made a tough call on a team earlier in the game to give them a power play, down the road he's going to make up to it, make it up to him, and he's going to give that team a power play on a similar call against the other club. Baseball, if DeGrom strikes out, I'll give you a better example. If Koufax strikes out Aaron in 1966 on a close 3-2 pitch with Doug Harvey behind the plate, and Koufax gets the call, the next at bat where Aaron's up, Aaron's going to get the call. That's just all there is to it. That's the way it works. They're going to balance it out. That's what a good official does. He balances everything out. Even last night, I was watching a high school game involving my high school team here against a very good club in Richfield. And I know the three officials very well, and they're all very good. And at the start of the second half, my team got called for about 8 personals, and the other team got called for 2. And, of course, penalty at 7, double bonus at 10. And, in a close game in the semifinals of a conference tournament, guess what happened? The next 5 calls were against the team that only had the 2 fouls. That's just the way it goes. I mean, that's basketball, and that's the way they should go. I mean, you cannot be involved in the course of these games, and you are going to even up the scenario as much as you can. And the NHL should know that. And the NHL, I guess they fired him because he made it obvious. He told you what we all know anyway. I don't like the language, but that he used, but he got an official supposed to be above the law, but he told you exactly what they do all the time. They make up calls and they try to make it fair, and if they make a little dubious call one way, one part of the game, they're going to go the other way, the other part of the game. That's just the way they do it, and that's the way they should do it. And that's the way they do it in all the sports, on a championship level especially. The NBA official, how many times has the great player never found out? I mean, that's just the way it goes. Or he makes the call in the first quarter on a play, charge to the basket, and then in the second half, fourth quarter, he doesn't make the call at all. I mean, the games are officiated differently as you move along in the game. Each shift is not officiated independently of the previous shifts, or a first period call is different than a third period call. That's the way it is. It has been that way for 100 years, and that's the way it's going to be. It's the human condition. It's the human condition. And the NHL, doesn't want to acknowledge that. And so out goes Peel today. And here's a guy that officiated 1,300 games in his NHL career, 90 postseason games. And you could sit there and say all you want about how he had a lot of lousy calls. And I guess on social media today got pounded. All right, well, I mean, that's neither here nor there. It's the first time I've ever heard of him. That's neither here nor there. So I'm going to lay low on that. His track record, and I know he got caught having a cocktail with a member of the media at a hotel bar earlier in the year, or maybe early in his career. You run into officials in hotel lobbies. They're traveling just as much as the writers are, so I don't even know if that's that big a deal. I guess that's a no-no. Who the hell knows? But the bottom line is the NHL responded today, and I thought a little too harshly. And Peel is out. That's number one. Number two, if anybody thinks that Draymond Green, if he thinks it's specifically that he is the greatest defensive player in the history of the NBA, if Green had heard, now he's heard of Rodman, but if Green had heard of Jerry Sloan as a player, or Nate Thurman as a center, or Russell, if he knew who these guys were, or if anybody who makes that kind of argument, if they knew the history of the league, and most people in sport, they don't know the history of the league like they should. That goes for coaches, players, announcers. A lot of these guys have no idea who these. If you knew Nate Thurman, who was one of the great defensive centers in the history of the basketball, who went up against, Chamberlain, Kareem, Russell, a million guys, and did a hell of a job on every single one of them, you would realize that's a great defensive player. Draymond Green might be a good defensive player. I don't see him every day. I don't watch the games on a day-in, day-out basis with Golden State. And in this day and age, it's a little tricky to figure out what sort of defense he is playing because of all the three-point shooting that's going on. But if for my money, if you ask me right now, do I think Draymond Green is the best defensive player in the history of the NBA, you're nuts. He is not the best defensive player in the history of the NBA. Rodman, for all his foibles, and he had plenty of them, was a hell of a defensive player. T.R. Dunn, going way, way back, a hell of a defense. I know nobody knows who T.R. Dunn is. Michael Cooper, a hell of a defensive player. I go on and give you names that Draymond Green's never heard of. In his sleep, he's never heard of them. Guys who played 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, he wouldn't know them if they fell on him. So I nobody's going to sit there and, outside of the old coaches, the Larry Browns, the Popoviches, who might have a little feel, most of these guys have, Steve Kerr probably doesn't know. Most of these guys don't know. That's defense. That's defense. Green's probably, I don't watch him every day. And I haven't watched him in 2 years. But they haven't been in the postseason in a while. But every time I watched them against Houston, the Rockets were firing up wide open threes. A lot of them they missed, but firing up wide open threes. If you're asking me right now, if I was giving you an all-time 5 defensively, would I put Draymond Green in the list? I would not. How's that? I would not. I would put Thurman. I hate to say it because I'm not a big fan. I would put Rodman. I might think of Ben Wallace. There are guys I can think of. I'd have to come up with a Cooper. I love Coop. There's guys I can tell you about. But the one guy, I'm trying to think of an old Nick. DeBusschere was a wonderful defensive player. I can bring him up. No, they fouled a lot. It was more physical. It was a different kind of game. DeBusschere, stopped Irving in his tracks in certain spots. In exhibition games and all. I would think of Walton. There's a lot of guys I can come up with. I would not think of Draymond Green. So I want to make sure that is on the table here, too. The other thing I wanted to bring up is the scenario of the women's sports. There's a big equality of pay issue going on in the scenario of women's sports. And there's just 2 things I want to say. And I'm going to stay away from the equality issue because that'll get me in trouble. What's the point? I'm not going to pick that battle today. There are 2 things I'm going to say about the women's sports issue that have really nothing to do with the pay, just from a sports perspective. Number one, I hate when people who want to campaign for women's sports try to tell me that if I don't watch women's sports religiously, and I'm one who watches it more than most because I love women's tennis, but they want to tell you that you're a bad guy, that you should not be, that you're a subhuman. You don't if you don't love women's sports, and if you didn't grow up with it, which a lot of my friends didn't, and you're not sitting there watching, UConn beat, Mount St. Mary's by 90 points in the second round of the NCAA tournament because there's no, there's no parity in college basketball on the women's side. That doesn't make you a bad person. And you're at the point now where if you don't basically bow down to the greatness of women's sports, that you're a terrible human being. And that bothers the hell out of me. I mean, you don't have. I mean, if I don't want to watch the women's tournament, yet I want to watch the men's tournament, what does that make me a bad person? I can't do sports talk. Is that what this is about? And now I watch women's tennis, but if I don't watch Osaka play Serena at the Australian Open semi, but I watch Djokovic play, Medvedev, I'm a horrendous sports fan. That's what this comes down to now. Or if I'm going to watch, Justin Thomas at the Players Championship at the TPC, but I'm not going to watch what's going on at the Diana Shore, that makes me a bad person. Boy, I hate that. I hate that. Why can't we just leave it alone and watch what you want to watch? That's the first thing. The second thing I want to say about it that is interesting that came up today, don't equate, I'm begging you, please, because it's an insult. Don't equate a women's gold medal or in soccer or a World Cup title for women or even UConn dominating in women's college basketball. Don't equate that to anything on the men's side with World Cup or on the NCAA men's side in basketball because the competition is not the same. All right? Please don't equate it. Phenomenal job, superb. Win all the women gold cups you want. The Olympic gold medals, not gold cups, Olympic gold medals you want. And win all the World Cups you want. 100%. But the talent, the degree of difficulty to do that in those two specific sports, in women's basketball and in women's soccer, is not even close to the parity and the amount of quality teams that, let's say, the men's soccer team has. How can anybody sit there and compare themselves, as a lot of the women's soccer players do, look what we've done for women's soccer compared to what the men have done? I mean, hold on now. Those teams are terrible in the women's World Cup. They're not on the same level. You're a great team, but your competition's terrible. The men's team's going up against Germany, the Netherlands, Brazil, Argentina, France, Italy. I mean, the level of competition for the men's team is not even, you can't even compare it. Their road to a Gold Cup scenario is incredibly difficult compared to the women's road. That's not to take away from the fact that the women won. All right, great. Love it. Well done. Nice job. Throw parades on the Canyon of Heroes all you want. But don't sit there and say, well, hold on, we've done, what we've done is, makes the men's team a joke. Oh, no, you're not beating the same teams the men. You're not going up against the teams that the men's team. These other countries don't have women's cup tradition. Half the teams don't even have a team. I mean, my God, come on, please. And that drives me crazy. It drives me crazy. And the women's team, too. UConn and Noriema is a wonderful coach, but come on now. There's 5 or 6 great women's teams. Don't compare them, to going through freaking Illinois just lost to Loyola of Chicago. Purdue just lost to North Texas. All right? Come on. Ohio State just lost to Oral Roberts, for crying out loud. No one bid league. Abilene Christian beat Texas. Don't compare it to what the gauntlet is in the men's. That's not fair. That's not fair. Don't do that. You want to get paid the same? You want the same status? I'm okay with it. If you want, obviously, you want the same equipment. We all know about the women's team. Didn't have the women's NCAA. Didn't have the same meals, weights, and all that. Fine. No issues. Equal. 100%. But don't sit there and tell me that your championship was harder to get than the men's title, or that your World Cup was as significant as winning it on the men's side, because the teams that you beat aren't as good. Got to be fair. You got to be fair. We'll take a timeout. We continue. We're on Mad Dog Unleashed.